I'm Sarah, and I did my lessons on the exploration and colonization of the U.S. I used this textbook. It's the United States, the Early Years. It's a fifth grade level textbook. Um, for my first lesson, I use the textbook. I do a scavenger hunt, and do a KWL with the students. At the end of this first lesson, I hope that my students are able to work in groups well, that they can identify different people who came to explore the United States. Um, Also, that they can identify what they knew before the lesson, during the lesson, and after the lesson, which would be the point of the KWL. Um, so I would start the class by describing what we were going to be learning about. I would pass out a KWL. I have a pre-printed one right here. I would explain to students that they need to put what they know about Christopher Columbus and other people who came to the United States, what they wonder about it, and then after they would put what they learned from the lesson today. Next, I would answer any questions that they had about the KWL or about what we would be learning about. And then we would move on to our scavenger hunt throughout the book. So in this book, Unit 2 is all comprised of the colonization. That's not what I'm teaching on complete throughout all these 3 lessons, but that's what the first book, Scavenger Hunt, will be through, because it gets the students to be able to explore the book and take what's in a book and put it on paper and kind of relay it into what they know. So they would be in groups. One student would be the writer on a piece of paper. There will be assigned titles of each section. There's 7 sections within Unit 2, and they all have different titles relating to people coming to the United States. So what I would want them to do is to find their title, find their unit, and then before they even look at the unit, I want them to write down 3 things that they think are going to be in the unit based on what the title says. So it kind of gets them inferring and get their intuition going about how a title of a section can give you hints about what is in that section. So after they're writing what they think will be in that section and collaborating with their group members, they will be able to go through their group or their unit and find 5 facts that actually are in it. And then after, they will be comparing and to see, okay, so we guessed this. This was what was actually in it. What was right? What were we wrong about? Were there similarities? Were there differences? And then it kind of gets them learning about the colonization of the U.S., but without actually just like reading the book and it being boring for them. It also helps with a lot of literacy techniques because, they're reading the book, they're getting the vocab words that are in their sections, they're understanding how to take something that they've read and put it on a piece of paper, which is super important, being able to relay that information. So at the end of their scavenger hunt, they will collaborate with different groups and kind of see, okay, so like what was your section about, and did you get things right or did you get things wrong? And then after that, they would go back to their KWL and they would put in the section what they learned. They can either put it about their section, they can put it about their peers section, they can really do whatever they want. It's just a matter of them showing me that they understood the content of the book. Excuse me. So that's kind of the first lesson, little breakdown of it. The second lesson that I'm going to do, one second, let's grab it, is really based on who is Christopher Columbus. So that first lesson, we kind of looked at the overview of all the different types of people that tried to travel here and sailed, whatever that they, however they tried to get here. But this one's going to be exactly based on Christopher Columbus. It'll also be using this book. And then I found a really cool article about Christopher Columbus on the Scholastic website. It's definitely going to be a higher read for those students, but they'll be able to do it. It has, it has a lot of words, but the thing about that is in this lesson, they're going to be picking out things that they remember from the reading. So they're not necessarily going to need to know everything, which I think it's still important to push what they can read and see what they get back out of it. So at the beginning of this lesson, my students will I will answer any questions from the day before, anything that they didn't understand, anything really. Then at the end of this lesson, they'll be able to understand who Christopher Columbus was. They'll be able to have a meaningful discussion about a specific topic because we're going to do a Socratic seminar, which a Socratic seminar is a group, and you have one topic, and then you're given questions about that topic that you read about to discuss and give your opinions for. And Socratic seminars can be really used for any grade level. It's just a matter of the level of difficultness for the readings or the questions, which obviously that makes sense. So prior to them reading this article, we're going to do a guided reading procedure. So they're going to learn how to read something, write down what they remember from it, and then go back and, okay, let's see. I remembered 3 things about this whole article, but there was so much more that was important in it. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to add things that I don't remember. So we'll do a guided reading about Christopher Columbus on this article. And I will have my students think about questions like, who is he? What have you heard about him? Do we listen to everything that we hear? Because, maybe your book's saying one thing and maybe the article's saying another thing. It's just one of those things where you pick and choose what you believe in. And I think that's a good lesson for nowadays anyway, because socially that's how it is. And so them being able to answer those questions and have a good little teeny short discussion before class starts about that will help me to get kind of where they're at in their in what they understand about Christopher Columbus. So next, I will have them do the GRP. They will read in depth this article, and then they will write down what they can remember. And I would definitely emphasize to them that it does not matter if you remember one thing or if you remember 10 things. Like, it's no different. It just is a matter of your comprehension. So if they don't remember much, like for my lower students, I would have them use the article to write down things that they remember for the Socratic seminar. Next, I would be answering any questions for what the reading was about. Then we would move on to a Socratic seminar, which would only be about 20 to 30 minutes. We'd do just a little short one. But it kind of it differentiates the learning, and it also helps with their discussion skills, which I think are super important because growing up, I didn't really have very good, talking skills in front of people. And so I think that it's important to start them young in groups because then they're kind of used to the situation of back and forth talking, and that it's okay to have different opinions than other people, which I think some people forget sometimes. So I think it's important for us to teach them that. So I would pass out a list of questions. I don't have them right now, but I would pass out a list of questions that would kind of get the flow of the Socratic seminar started. Each student for the Socratic seminar would be assessed by the fact if they answer two or more questions. So as long as they answer two questions or talk twice, they don't have to exactly answer the question, but if they respond to a student, then they will pass for that Socratic seminar for that day. So just as a closing statement, I would have an exit slip. My students would write down two things that they liked about a Socratic seminar and one thing that they didn't like about it. I think that as a aspiring teacher, I really would want to hear from what my students feel about the lessons. Like, I want to know if a lesson's, maybe I think, excuse me, I think a lesson's super good, and then they hated it, and then that means that for next year I can change it, or we can do it again in a whole different way. So I think that that's really important. So moving on to my third lesson. In this lesson, we're doing two activities. They are also based on Christopher Columbus, but they have a little bit more free will on what person they want to choose for their word bubbles. So we're going to do word bubbles to begin with, using the book that I showed you, and pretty much just the book, and in the examples that I've given them, they can look at. So before we start, obviously I would go over anything that they didn't understand from the previous day, anything they're still kind of iffy about Christopher Columbus, because this assignment is going to get more in-depth into the details of him. Any questions that they have about him, they can write on it. That's what the word bubble is for. It's kind of for, let's focus in on one, and then let's write the topics, the facts about him that you find interesting. Students that are excelling, they don't necessarily have to use the book. If they remember plenty from the day before, they can try and do it without the book. The only reason that I would let them use the book is that they are able to pick whoever they want. They don't have to do Christopher Columbus. They can do someone else who came to the U.S. or tried to find it. Pretty much anything that has to do with the exploration of the United States. So I would give them an example, kind of like this. It's always nice to start with an easy example, because then the students are able to see it in a more simple way, and then they can transfer it into putting Christopher Columbus here, and then facts about him, like when dates he traveled, how many times he traveled, and like I mentioned, they can put questions too, like why did he do it? What type of environment was he in? Anything that they're curious about Christopher Columbus. As long as they have 5 facts and a couple questions, they will get a check mark on this assignment, because it's not really a right or wrong, it's a do you understand or do you not assignment. So after that, we would go on. Throughout all of these lessons, while they're doing these activities, I would be walking around and monitoring them, answering any questions that they have, giving them insightful questions to think about, really just being there for them, but not necessarily, but they will be monitoring how the flow of the classroom goes on, pretty much. So the next thing that we will be doing would be an annotated picture. I learned this in one of my other classes, and I really liked it. I don't have an example, because the examples that he showed in my other class, they were done by actual kids, and I think that it's really cool, but I'm going to explain it. So I would give my students this picture. It's Christopher Columbus sailing on the Santa Maria, and I would ask them what they see in it. So the nice thing about an annotated picture is that they can give it a title, they can color it themselves, because I want them to look at this, but I want them to draw their own on their own piece of paper, and they can give the characters in here different dialogue. So they can give Christopher Columbus, he's saying, oh, look over there, land, and then these people are saying, like, help me, let's get in the boat. They have a totally free to do whatever they want. There's just those few things that they have to have, but they can say whatever they want, they can do whatever they want, they can use whatever color they want. It's nice because it kind of shows the teacher what kind of point of view the students see. Like the fact that there's a ship back there. I didn't even notice that before, and the students, they'll be looking at every detail and being able to give dialogue to these characters almost, and make it a fun little activity for them to do. Um, in this one, I would differentiate the lesson by telling the students that we're going to hang them up after. If we don't do that for a lot of our work, then that's something that they can strive towards and create a better artwork for it. So this lesson kind of integrates art, literacy, and history in it, which I think is really important to integrate as much as you can to get their minds flowing. So that's my 3 lessons. I had a pretty good time. It was pretty fun doing it. It's definitely hard to be able to connect all 3 lessons together. But I think that's just something that takes practice. Yeah, well, thank you for listening, and yeah, it was awesome.